Hi everyone, welcome at Tech Day. Today is all about technology, or maybe even more important, about the people behind it, the developers, the engineers, and the architects, because they are the ones that create the technology that we use every day. And I cannot imagine a day without using tech to stay in touch with the world. And I think I speak for all of us, and I can say that the pandemic over the last 2 years intensifies this. Tech is even more important and maybe even essential. I think a lot of organizations are focusing on tech more than ever before. Technology is part of the boardroom, and more companies are creating their strategy around technology. But for many organizations, this is easier said than done. Culture is strongly rooted and not ready for a tech-centered approach. And that is what we want to talk about today. What do we need to do to have a tech-centered approach and build the culture for developers around it? We hope that today's program will inspire you, and I will read my cards to make sure that I make no mistake while introducing our guests, because we have a great program. In a couple of minutes, we will kick off with one of the most known digital innovators of our time. Spotify became the leading company in transforming the way we enjoy music. As a pure digital product offering, they embraced a developer-first culture within the beginning of the start of their company. I'm really looking forward to Tim Kamper, who is interviewing Martin Florian, the technology operations lead at Spotify, committed to designing systems of work where engineers can excel. Right after that interview, we will move over, it will be around 4 o'clock, to an amazing panel with 4 leading Dutch companies. The panel is being led by Jonathan Whiteside from DEPT, and KPN, Ahold Delhaize, DAS and Unive will join and share their experience for the need for organizational change and the challenges they face while doing so. And then around 4:30, we have the interview with one of the most iconic brands of the Netherlands, PostNL, where Jonathan will talk with Bart Delmuul how PostNL is using technology to make sure that over 1 million parcels arrive on time at your doorstep every day. And even more important, what the future for PostNL will look like and what the role of technology will be. And there's also sad news, because we also plan to have an interview with Daniel Gabler from Picnic, but due to this pandemic, he is unable to join today. So we hope to interview him somewhere the coming days or weeks, and once we have done it, we will make sure you will find it somewhere in your email. But for now, sit down, relax, and enjoy Tech Day, starting with Spotify.
Hello everyone, my name is Tim de Kamper, I'm Director e-commerce at DEPT. Today we'll be talking about what it takes to create a developer-first culture in your organization. I have been able to work as a developer in the past, and therefore I'm thrilled to talk about this topic. And I'm happy, Martin, to talk to you today. Martin is Technology Operations Lead at Spotify. And I'm honored to be able to talk to you about this topic. Martin, can you do an introduction of yourself?
Hi, welcome. Thank you very much for having me here, Tim. It's a pleasure. I can say I also come from a developer background. I've been an engineer writing software for over the 10 years, probably in the beginning of my career, and then had an opportunity to move into supporting others in doing that great job and trying to build environments and cultures where people can really excel. So it's going to be a great time trying to share some of those experiences and insights with you folk here.
Great. Thank you so much, Martin. So before we talk about what it takes to create developer-first organization, can you give a bit of a background about, let's say, the technology department at Spotify? So how many developers are working, for example, at Spotify, more or less, and how is it organized?
Yeah, so it really depends. So we're a growing organization. Spotify is probably over 7,000 people now, and a big majority of that is in technology, building our applications and all the systems that support it. And I'm sure many of you have heard about some of the artifacts of our structure, where we have missions, tribes, squads. But really, I think what underpins is that we are organized in a matrixed way, in a lot of cross-functional collaborative teams that have end-to-end ownership of the stack, where they can really build independently, deliver features, and then in collaborations with other building the big application.
Okay. So would you say that, let's say, the developers or those, let's say, teams as you described are very much owning their own roadmap, or is that more business driven and decided upon from a high strategic level?
So this is super interesting, because at Spotify, we don't tend to talk about this distinction between IT or technology and business. We tend to think about this as, one coherent organization where everybody has a voice and an influence on what we want to do. The way we tend to work is, of course, there is a set of high-level goals, directions. There's a vision that our senior leaders are helping us shape. But the actual strategies and the execution and the direction that the teams actually execute towards comes from taking that top-level, high-level direction and adding to it the local context, knowledge, and experience that sits in the teams.
So, but then would you say that there is not so much of a higher plan and let's say global direction that Spotify is taking, and from a technology point of view?
We absolutely have that, and we absolutely have visions, roadmaps, goals, plans, but they are not just top down. They're basically a mixture of top down direction and bottoms up innovation, I would say.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the culture then with Spotify and developer first culture. So how would you describe the culture in that sense at Spotify?
When I think about culture, I always think that it's a bit tricky, because at the end of the day, how culture manifests itself is in the behaviors, interactions that people can experience. And when we think about culture as through that lens, at Spotify, it really is very different across the organization. And not only different depending on where you are in the organization, but it also changes with time, because you have different people, different challenges, different needs. But what binds us together and what sets the direction, what makes all of these experiences somewhat consistent and coherent is our set of values. And recently we've actually shared with the world more broadly our set of values in something we call the Band Manifesto. So if you're interested in reading more, I really encourage you to search for that, Spotify Band Manifesto. It's a great article trying to explain that. But at the high level, we have 5 driving values. We want to be innovative. We want to be sincere, honest with each other. We have a lot of passionate people, so passion is another value. We're collaborative. Today's software environment and the complexity of the things that we build means that we can no longer do this in isolation by individuals. Teams are super important, and how teams collaborate is super important. So that collaboration is another important value. And then we also are playful. We don't want to take ourselves too seriously. We want to enjoy the work that we do. So these are the 5 values that underpin our culture. And then I would say something that will probably weave into this conversation going forward as well is that we also take very seriously having high level of diversity, create an inclusive culture, and trusting people.
Okay, that's very interesting. And I know a lot of organizations struggle with, for example, finding the right balance between developers who are brilliant in development, but perhaps less communicative, and therefore making collaboration and working in teams a bit harder. Do you have those kind of challenges as well in Spotify, and how do you deal with that?
I mean, I think the first thing that we do is we really think about what is most important. And for us, what is most important is having people who are able to collaborate. So this is something we put a lot of emphasis, for example, during hiring. Like, are you interested in coming into an organization where you will spend a lot of time working with others, and then how you work with others and how you can grow with others and help others grow and help yourself grow matters probably more than the actual set of skills that you have today.
Yeah. Okay. And from your opinion, so what defines a developer-first culture in an organization?
So I want to start by trying, Tim, to rephrase this question a little bit, because when I think about this, just thinking about developer-first culture is probably a little bit too narrow, at least if I reflect of how we think about this at Spotify. And I would say this is more about a knowledge work-first culture. And why I'm saying this is because it's not just developers who are really contributing to building our products. It's, of course, people in engineering, the product designers, the people who do design, people who work with data and insights, but all the other people as well who work at the company. So I think in that sense, like maybe developers aren't that special because they are just another in the group of the knowledge workers, the people who really create value and work creatively together to bring something. So through that lens, I think that what is important, or what defines that culture, is a situation where we really recognize the contribution of everyone towards building the company. So it's, recognizing the importance of setting the direction that we started with, having that vision, goals that our leaders set, but also, what everyone along the way brings in terms of their skills and their ability to contribute and their ideas. Yeah. So in that sense, like there are three pillars, and they may sound familiar because they've been popularized by Dan Pink, and we've been inspired by his work around purpose, mastery, and autonomy. So these are the three things for me that would really define that kind of culture that promotes knowledge work.
Yeah. Okay. And that is, you just explained that you, of course, not started working with Spotify directly after your study. Do you see that indeed Spotify is different in that sense, or is that something which you see common as within your working experience?
So I would say that a lot has been changing in the environment and in the companies that I've had a chance to interact with, but it's not yet as common as I would like to see it. And for example, the idea of autonomy, let's take that one for a moment, that it is really important for people to have agency around the work that they do, so that they can influence what kind of tools they use, what kind of ways of working they prefer, what kind of environment they want to build. Like that is not yet very common, or not as common, at least as I would like to see.
No. And how is Spotify organized in that sense? So developers tend to have, of course, let's say, chosen specialty in a technology framework. Do you see a lot of developers switching from specialties, from technologies, from frameworks? Is Spotify open? Is that promoting those kind of changes and having more diverse profiles, or are you looking more for let's say, specialized developers in certain technologies, and is that perhaps also driven by the needs and the wishes and the goals of developers themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've made a very good point here, that it is important to allow people to develop and grow in the direction that they feel passionate and engaged with. So yeah, there's definitely an element of us wanting to give people an opportunity to work on problems that they feel connected to, that they are relevant for them. in terms of like this, there's always this question between, should we have people with high levels of or high degree of specialization or more breadth? And these days, seeing how much of the like specialization has been going into infrastructure and libraries, I think it is increasingly important for people to not leave that breadth behind, but add that breadth. So being able to maybe go between, I don't know, mobile development and web development, and sometimes doing some backend development. And so in that sense, we talk a lot in the company about this idea of T-shapedness, that as an engineer, you probably have some skills that are very deep, but you're also trying to grow that extra breadth. And for example, we do a lot of education internally where people can cross-educate themselves, cross-skill, if you like. We're looking at people being able to, start contributing towards our mobile applications if they're backend engineers, or trying to contribute toward data pipelines if they've been a mobile engineer before.
Yeah. So there's a lot of opportunities, I can imagine, within Spotify to develop yourself as a developer, as a software engineer in different directions. So that's of course a big benefit. So now, would you say it's important to have a culture that's developer driven at a company like Spotify? Mm-hmm. And if yes, why?
So I think that you've already alluded at the start of this event that software is becoming, more and more popular and is basically underpinning more and more companies. I mean, it's enough to think about, is Tesla really a car company? Is Netflix really a media company? And is Amazon a commerce company? Right? Like these are all companies that, of course, function in those markets, but they wouldn't be there if they did not have the engineering capabilities that they have today. So as we've probably heard a while ago, software is eating the world, and it's even more true now than it was before, probably. So I think in that sense, of course, it is very important to have an organization where we can really leverage that skills. I also think about this, why is this important? We tend to hire smart people. And so the best thing we can do is create an environment where we kind of get out of their way, allow them to use that smartness, that experience to build the great products, so that we can really engage their potential and bring the best solutions to the really hard problems that we're facing right now.
Yeah. And suppose that, let's say, Spotify is very much, let's say, a tech-driven organization at the heart, at its nature. What would you say, what organizational challenges does it bring to create a tech-driven organization?
Mm-hmm. So I think especially, so as you said, absolutely, Spotify comes from a history where basically, the first 10 or 50 people who worked at Spotify were all engineers. So it is really very much rooted in engineering and that technology first culture. And of course, we have many more people now who have many more skills that they're bringing in, but that kernel is still there. And I know that not all organizations are like that. So I think it's the challenge is like, how do you shift the focus? How do you understand, creating good relationships? I know a lot of organizations, for example, have a big difficulty with that divide, having those two mindsets of like, here's a business and here's technology that supports that business. And usually they speak different language. They cannot really connect well. They cannot understand each other. So that's, of course, a big challenge. How do you bridge that gap? How do you have people who have the understanding of what the business needs and what the technology side can provide for that business need? And then I think what as you start building that kind of culture or embrace technology more, you have to then start thinking about how do you balance things like that autonomy that I was talking about, really letting the technology organization build the things in the right way with the alignment towards company goals. And how do you create the right organizational structures that allow that collaboration to flourish, really. So, should you have a completely different or separate technology organization, or really is technology organization just part of all your business units in a way that they are focused on the company goals?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, because in every organization you have different teams, of course. But are you almost suggesting that let's say teams like marketing or sales team or customer service or whatever teams you would have in an organization would have its own developers as part of the team to build the tools that they would need? Or
absolutely, I think you can even think about this differently. A development team, if it's building marketing tools, should have marketers on that team. So I think like the closer we can bring the people who can support and build those tools and technology, and the people who understand the problems and understand the needs, the better technology solutions we can build.
Yeah. Okay. Can you say anything about how Spotify is able to attract the best talent, or at least, trying to?
Absolutely, yeah. Trying to is the right framing here, because of course it's a big challenge. Everyone wants to have great developers, and we're no exception. Of course, one of the ways we try to do that is to build a good brand with our product, but also as an employee brand. But I'd say, I think the way we tend to think about this is not about bringing necessarily the most talented people into the organization, but the people who can really thrive and contribute to the organization. So sometimes maybe they don't even have the strongest technical skills, although I have to say we're very blessed with being able to attract a lot of people who have exceptional technology skills. But we really put a lot of emphasis on bringing people in who share our values, but also who come from diverse backgrounds, so that we can have as many different perspectives in the organization. And then people who demonstrate growth mindset. So the people who come to us open-minded, willing to learn a lot of new things, even if this is, changing technology, or as we talked earlier today, changing the discipline in which they work. And then I think when it comes to attracting people, creating a place where they want to be, I think there are maybe 2 or 3 things which are important. One is, let's give people problems that they care about, they're passionate about, so that they have a clear purpose to the work they do. How can we support them with an environment where they can really do their best work? And how can we give them the freedom and flexibility to choose how they want to work? So, for example, Spotify last year announced our work from anywhere policy, where rather than trying to attract people as we did before into our offices in a few locations across the globe, now we've opened up from people joining us from many more locations.
Okay, that's interesting indeed. So would you say that Spotify also has close ties with the open source community? And do you, let's say, the things that you built, are you very open in promoting that in an open source community and promoting others to use, let's say, the learnings that you had or the tools that you've been building for internal purposes outside of the Spotify organization as well?
So I would say we have, as an organization, and as I know many tech organizations today, have benefited from being able to leverage a lot of really amazing, really high quality open source libraries and tools. And we've tried to give back to the community a little bit as well. So whenever we've built a piece of technology that really helped us, but isn't necessarily, our secret sauce, doesn't form the competitive advantage of our business, we try to open source that and encourage others to use it. And of course, that has an added benefit of getting many more developers across the world looking at the software using and contributing back to it. So I think it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I do see that we have a question from the audience, a question from Jasper. With a developer culture, how do you keep the user in mind? And maybe the user is then representing business or not, but how would you see that?
Great question. I think that is very important. That's what I've alluded to before when I said, bring all these people who have the domain knowledge and the skills into the development team, because that's how you can connect really closely people like the engineers who build the software with the problems they're trying to solve. So some of the things we do is, of course, we do a lot of user research. And in that user research, you meet people, you create personas, you record interviews, make those interviews available to engineers so that they can actually experience and see what it's like for the user to use the product that they're building. I think the best thing we can do is really give our engineers and developers an ability to experience what it's like to use the product and see how the users are experiencing it. And of course, at Spotify, we have a bit of an advantage. Everybody in the company has Spotify on their phone, so they're also users of the app. But if you're not in that situation, try to find as many opportunities to connect the people who built those solutions to the people who are using them.
Yeah, that's key, of course. So a question which comes to my mind is at least in my experience, we quite often encounter projects, organizations with a lot of heritage and legacy, but also in projects which are created newly. And I'm sure it's the same thing in Spotify, that sometimes in order to reach the deadline, you take certain shortcuts in the development team and you say, we fix these things later. So creating technical debt, is that, how do you deal with technical debt issues? Is that indeed something you encounter as well, or how is that working for Spotify?
I don't think there's an organization that builds software that does not have some experience of deteriorating tech health, which very often manifests itself in technical debt. And I think it's always a very hard balance to strike of, how much of your capacity do you invest in building new features, and how much of your capacity you're investing in fixing some of the shortcuts, as you said, that maybe you've taken before. I think there are at least a few things that are important. So you want to, first of all, when you can, be very deliberate about taking some of those shortcuts. And when you do, have a plan for how you're going to address this later. It doesn't always work. I think the other very important thing is really use the engineering practices that help you deal with minimizing that accumulation of technical debt. Of course, automated testing, breaking things down, using test-driven development, pair programming, using your code base as clean and readable as possible, working in small iterations. There is a ton of fantastic technical practices that really help us, create small incremental improvements. Whenever you go back to a piece of code and you build a new feature, adding that extra capacity to make sure that you can also fix things along the way, because maybe you're going to be coming back to that functionality later to fix it. But it's always a challenge, always a balance. Entropy is against us, and we always have to keep adding that energy to make sure that our software doesn't deteriorate.
Yeah. Well, I understand. And another question from the audience, interesting, I think. So you're obviously a growing organization at least from what I can see, great speed. So how do you deal with agility and responding to those changes in that sense? So do you have big reorganizations in order to be able to grow to the next level in that sense? And how is that working also for let's say, a tech-based company like you? Yeah,
absolutely. Great question. I think, so one of the things that I reflect immediately on is, mentioned this like great big reorganizations that you have to do. And what we try to do, and this is one of the things that are present in our band manifesto that I mentioned at the beginning, is that we think that change is the only constant. So rather than waiting for these big reorganizations in the company, we try to make small tweaks all the time. And we do that, like the latest reorg in the part of the organization where I'm working happened 2 months ago. And the previous one was probably 6 months before that. So being very open to the fact that the reality, the structures that we have today are temporary necessarily, because the circumstances will change, and we have to get just used to those changes. You know, it's a little bit like with software. We used to say, you know, when you have problem releasing and when you do 2 releases a year, the best thing you can do is do them more frequently. And it turns out that it similarly works with changing your organization itself. Like if you create small tweaks all the time along the way, then almost you don't have a need for those big reorganizations that sometimes are, you know, lengthy and painful. But regardless, everything, like the way I at least think about our company is that every single time we double in size, everything is kind of up in the air, and we have to reinvent a lot of the ways of working, processes, structures to support that new scale.
Yeah. Could you say anything about how Spotify is organized in terms of nearshoring? So do you rely on nearshoring a lot, and how do you make sure that also with nearshoring teams that the culture which you have, let's say, embraced as Spotify is being distributed over all the teams in all locations?
So actually, that's not how we think. Definitely, like pretty much all of our development happens in-house. The people are employees of Spotify. But the question of nearshoring is interesting with this notion of, you know, working from anywhere. So now our engineers, our people are no longer co-located in the offices, or not all of them, but they're distributed much more around the world. And of course, with the pandemic that we've all been going through, everyone's been working from home. So that's like almost completely distributed organization. And throughout all this time, we've been bringing new people in. So I think it is very important to first understand what is like, have a good hiring practices and having people who are aligned with our values, aligned with our ways of working, and then invest really in onboarding. So we have very structured, well-designed onboarding programs that really help the newcomers understand the organization and how to best operate there.
Yeah. Okay. Another question from the audience here. To what extent are you still working according to the Spotify engineering model, as shown by Henrik Wieberg?
I think that's a super interesting question. I would say the answer is both. We do and we don't. So the principles that underpinned that model that weren't really described explicitly there are very much still in the company. But the actual, you know, the chapters, guilds, tribes, squads, some of those structures are still there, but many of them have changed dramatically, I would say. But we still, you know, very much believe in cross-functional teams that work. You know, collocation is a good example of something that has changed, right? Like we were very strictly collocated in the same office, in the same squad rooms. And now we're much more looking at working in a distributed fashion. But we still believe that giving the autonomy to the teams, that having those cross-functional teams with all the skills in the team, that giving people responsibility for end-to-end life cycle of the product that they're building or the features that they're owning, these are the things that are the same.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So I believe this is the end of the interview. And it was a pleasure to talk to you, Martin. It gave me a lot of insights in how Spotify is dealing with the developer-first culture and what we can learn from the Spotify model, and also the reasons why it's been shifting in last year. So I'd like to thank you very much. I'd like to thank the audience for...
It's been a pleasure. I hope it was useful and inspiring for some of you folks, and I hope you have a great rest of the event.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your contribution, Martin.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye. So I hope that you all enjoyed the conversation that we had with Spotify, with Martin. At least for me personally, it was great to have some insights in how Spotify is dealing with the questions we had around remote work, with developer-first culture, etc. So thank you very much for being with us, and we'll jump over to the panel discussions after this.
Today I'm going to be hosting a panel session about how to transform your organisation into a more technology-focused company. Most IT departments today don't have the luxury of starting from scratch when they're starting to change the mindset into a more engineering and technology-based setup. So during the next 30 minutes, I'll be asking questions to a panel of IT leaders from some very well-known companies to discuss the opportunities and the challenges about how a company does do that transformation into a more technology-driven company. So welcome all of you. Thank you for finding the time today to come and speak to me and talk to each other on this panel. To get started, the first thing I'd like to do is for you to introduce yourselves. So if you could just give a brief introduction, your name, your role, and also a bit of an introduction about your company you work for. So I'm going to start off furthest to me. Harry, can you start off?
Sure, no problem. My name is Harry Heijers. I'm IT director for business markets at KPN. KPN is the largest Dutch telco company. There's a lot to say about it, but I think everybody understands telco, right, these days.
Perfect, yeah.
Yes, my name is Erik Hietkamp. I'm IT director of DAS, and DAS is a legal insurance company in the Netherlands, and also one of the biggest legal service providers of the big insurance companies to do legal and to give legal service to them.
That's great, thanks. Peter.
Hi, Peter de Koeijer. I work for Albert Heijn, biggest supermarket in the Netherlands. We operate 1,100 stores in the Netherlands and Belgium. And within Albert Heijn, I'm responsible for retail technology.
Perfect. And last but not least.
Okay. Frank Dijkstra, IT director for Unive. Unive is an insurance company, Dutch-based insurance company, with both a big digital presence, but also, which is quite unique, a strong physical presence with over 100 stores in the Netherlands.
That's great. Thank you. Thanks for that introduction. So what I'm going to do, if I've got around 5 or 6 different questions, which I'm going to pose to you all, and really to provoke some discussion between yourselves. So I'm going to start with the first one. So what I'd like to ask you is, should the IT department today, should they always be part of strategic business making decisions? Should they be a part of that process? And I will start with Peter.
It's easy, it's 100% yes.
Yeah? Okay.
You have the easy question.
No, I think in this day and age where we live now, I think tech is such a big part of all decision making and all the stuff we are trying to bring to our customers that you can go around IT or tech anymore. So I'm not sure anyone opposes to that.
I was going to say, does anyone disagree with that at all?
I fully disagree.
The question is whether it should be the IT department.
Yeah,
itself.
okay.
IT itself is and always should be part of the strategic decision.
Yep.
You can't do it without it. But whether the IT department itself should be part of it, I think there's more IT knowledge also in other areas in the organization. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe you have to redefine it in digital instead of IT.
Okay.
IT sounds a little bit old-fashioned, but it depends on in which maturity level an organization has, of course. But to be a tech company, I think you have to both build up strong digital capabilities and digital leadership skills. And yes, to build up, for instance, digital capabilities, it is important to have a strong digital platform. And to build that digital platform, as a consequence, you have to involve IT or digital skills in decision making. Yeah.
So previously IT teams potentially were a little bit more of a supporting function, let's say, within an organisation.
In old-fashioned form.
Yeah, and in an old-fashioned setting. And now, you say, probably not IT skills, but digital skills are crucial to every member of the organisation. So do you think, in terms of strategic decision making, that IT or digital has a function in terms of setting the capability, in terms of the skill sets of the employees in the organisation? What do you think about that, Harry?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I do think that's true. On the other hand, what you also see is that the digital, the whole digital thinking and the digital capability, which I do think is something different than IT capability, has become more of a common skill from many people. Like, I mean, 20 years ago, you could live in marketing and not do data analysis. I mean, that you could have a life. I mean, but there's no way you can do that these days, right? So your digital capability in that function has gone up very much, and I do think that's around the board actually. When you look at all the functions, I do think all the basically almost all the functions. I maybe at Albert Heijn as a cashier, I'm not
They're fully digitally
maybe
equipped.
too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So they have a lot of material, a lot of IT. But I mean, so you got to have these capabilities in all the other departments as well to survive these days.
Do you think then that, I'm going to stick or move away from calling it IT departments, but the digital capability of digital leadership within an organisation, do you think at the moment, and this is a wide statement, do you think the teams do you think that they are lacking knowledge and experience to be a true strategic business partner to set the agenda of how an organisation moves forward? What do you think about that? Do you think it's something that needs to be built, or?
I think it depends on in which states of maturity you are as an organization. Which level of maturity do you have in digital maturity as an organization? And when the digital maturity is a little bit poor, then you might see a more classical way of working in an organization between business on the one and IT on the other. In the classic way, the demand-supply relationship. And when the digital maturity is growing in an organization, the relationship between IT and business is growing as well. And finally, it is in fusion. In my ideal world, it is in fusion, and that you don't have anymore an IT strategy, but a digital strategy.
Yes.
And no IT skills, but digital skills. But that's a growing. It's not a change at once, but it's a growing. It's a journey.
But it's also a cultural one. I would say. So it's one of the first things I always. When you're getting into digital transformation, one of the first things I teach business is to tell them that they are not my client. The client is the client of our business, but it's not, they are not my client, because they will act like clients when this is a very classical way of looking at IT.
Being as a supplier, as a support function rather than a
there's a lot of stuff but you want to have the balance, right? There's a lot of stuff that we want to bring to the table that like you could also do this, right? So if I'm going to wait just for the requirements, because they thought about something, and they'll always be disappointed because what they want is always hard to build. But there's a lot of stuff that we can build easily that they could be very happy with. So finding that right balance is that's I do think the key in becoming digital mature.
Frank, you were agreeing a lot with Eric before.
Yeah, sure. And it's the skill sets on both sides of the equation to change. It's business is becoming more and building more on their tech skills and becoming more tech savvy. The IT side, it has to be more business aware and more business savvy. Absolutely. And so it's that combination which thrives the digital change. So it requires change on both sides. And then you come together, and then you have a joint effort to really work together instead of being two different separate parties doing their own thing.
Peter?
Yeah, I completely agree. And the way I'm a bit giggly is that I think our biggest transformation bit is now 3 years, 4 years behind us.
Okay.
And I can't even remember how this demand supply thing works, right?
Yeah.
How I as IT were perceived as an enabler. And of course that's an easy role to dive into, right? Because it's just waiting for requirements and then you build stuff, implement it and you run it. But if I look at the teams now, they're all joined together. And like you said, it's my biggest ambition that we don't speak of tech teams or business teams whatsoever. You have product teams, and together collectively they understand what are the customer insight, what are the customer drivers, what are the problems they want to solve together. And tech will do their part, marketing will do their part, everybody is doing their part. And that's basically how we are now structuring the teams. And if you start structuring the teams, then you see also to attract the right people, and then things, well, not really magically, it's still hard work, but it will come together, yeah.
Okay, we'll come back to some of that point and some of the business change that needs to happen to support some of that change of cross-functional teams working together. But do you believe that digital teams and IT departments are responsible for and should be leading innovation or the innovation agenda within an organisation? Or again, is that the responsibility for everyone?
Yeah, and of course that's the easy answer. But generally I don't think IT should be leading innovation. I think customer insight should be leading innovation. So who's your customer? What are the problems they want to have solved? How can we inspire? How can we create a better living for them? And that's then the collective problem we need to solve together. And so I'm it is good for our ego, but I'm not in strong favor of IT leading innovation. It's
the argument against that is almost, you know, the knowledge in the organisation isn't evenly spread in terms of what's possible from a technological standpoint. Do you believe that? Or
but I think then the right question is do you ask tech to really stretch the ambition? And I think that's really where we can make a difference, right? Because we have customer insights, we have problems to solve, but we also have these loads of new and emerging technologies coming up, and we can then even go a stretch further. And of course, I think that's where we come in.
I'm absolutely sure that IT should not be leading the innovation. Actually, I do think obviously IT is involved in innovation. I mean, you can't do without IT these days. I do think, but understanding, for example, platform economies. As I'm just taking one, that is not an IT skill. That is something that you have to really understand business models and have some sort of an entrepreneurial mind to explore that and start doing experiments and so on. IT normally has these obviously we have learned to work with sprints and that sort of thing. But when you look at innovation, you gotta have a very different approach to risk taking, for example, and proving the major risk wrong and that sort of thing. So it's a very different from the normal IT process. But that's a separate skill.
Is it an important question? Is IT leading the?
Or does it vary between organisations depending on what the profile is?
And I fully agree. The customer to have the right customer insights, and of course, IT has a responsibility because IT can enable to connect with certain platforms. But you need a business, you need a customer to drive that innovation. So, for me, it's not a very important question. You have to have a culture that you can make space for that innovations and to try to experiment with those new technologies.
I think that's where a large role for IT is. It's not leading the innovation, but it's more enabling.
Exactly.
We need to be ready for the next question. So the technology which is going to be needed maybe in 2 years' time, be sure that you have it up front instead of then when the question arrives that you then at that time need to think about, that's new technology, I need to build it. Be ready earlier than the question arises to deliver it.
Having the building blocks ready to, for the business side what to build.
Yeah, so that's more enabling than leading, I think. But you play a big role in innovation. That's true.
When you think of innovation, and innovation is like a separate company. It's like failing fast and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a completely different culture. It's very different from the way we tend to do business. When we think about fiber rollout, for example, which is huge, massive. There's a lot of finance involved and so on, and billions we put into the ground. I mean, those projects don't mix that with innovation, because innovation is something that you need to just set 50,000 euros apart to do an experiment and fail fast. See if this doesn't work, because most of the things will fail. It's a very, very different attitude that you need to make innovation work. And obviously you need to have the capability to understand the market and what technology can bring, but that's not something new for the IT department. That's something that we have done always.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one, given the mix of different type of organisations here today, in terms of appetite for risk and appetite for experimentation. Because I imagine some of your organisations are naturally adverse to experimentation. So how do you go about, from an enabler standpoint from innovation, trying to get that mindset into the business and saying, it is okay to try things. These aren't the days where things really can go terrible wrong. How do you think about that?
I don't know if any company can allow itself to be not innovative. So whether you're an insurance company which might be risk averse, even we have to be innovative, and we need to. I think the big question for IT departments is, we do the experimentation, we do an innovation, but how do you scale up? Because then the question comes to the IT department, how do you deliver it is at scale? How do you make it secure? How do you make it integrate with all the other stuff you have? So that's
and that's a big challenge.
And that's a big challenge.
I can imagine.
So that's where our experience come in, and we can make sure that something which is an experiment can be delivered at scale. So that's.
That's always also. I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
But it's also where I always see the problem with discussing with the business, because then we've built this prototype where basically it does nothing other than just having these fancy screens on the front side that we can take customers through, and everybody gets enthusiastic. There's no back end at all, and obviously so it's like the top of the mountain that you're just seeing. So the business is thinking, it's already done, and then basically we have to explain that 95 of the problems still exist.
But that's the reason I think it's important to invest in an architecture which enables experiments. So when you have an architture and to be flexible and to build on a very quick way new features.
Try things out.
Try things out. But that's so I think architecture is one of the key elements in a tech company or a tech-driven or digital-driven company, because
but also culture, right? Because it also
it's also
I think it's also up to us it's also up to us to create a safe environment for teams to fail at scale. Because it's easy to just, like you said, just create a prototype and then throw it over the fence and expect it to be scalable. But then it's really just bring it up to scale and then working through all the thresholds of the performance issues we have all over the place, and then still just push the boundaries, and if we fail, okay, scale a little bit back, improve and go further. But if we, I think we all move beyond the point that it first need to be like 150% assured and agreed and before we roll it out. But it's really also push your engineers really just to try to experiment within the constraints we have. So don't kill my 1100 stores, right? But it's okay just to push the boundaries as long as you know how to roll back and then learn from it and then move further.
So do you think to allow that mindset and that cultural shift to happen, do you think the business's way of a business side, their way of working, needs to align a little bit more in new modern tech ways of doing things. So in terms of cross-functional teams, in terms of agile sprints and those sorts of things. Because I personally seen some examples where the tech team's way of working is very modern and agile, but the business is very traditional, and then there's a bit of a clash. Yeah. So how do you think those two things should align, and do you think a business should be starting to think more like a tech company so it can move fast?
Well, I've seen multiple models work by now. I used to work for ABN AMRO Bank, for example, where we've made that shift towards, where we've integrated the product teams and the IT teams together. What I also have to see is that at KPN, basically, especially at the business side, those are separate groups. So we have the business line, business market, which is, I don't think you could say that they are old-fashioned, but I mean it's a traditional hierarchical organization, and where we have all the fancy stuff like agile teams and autonomy and that sort of thing. So it's and you can see that it's hard to build that bridge.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. That takes a lot of effort, and failing, for example, is something that's really hard. And I do think failing is always hard.
Yep.
But so that's really a cultural change. On the other hand, I do think it's inevitable to make the next step and to integrate into product and IT teams.
Yep.
And I do see all the cultural differences and challenges. And only the humor in IT teams is different from the humor in business teams, right? So it is like water and oil to mix.
Makes a good dressing.
Sorry?
Yeah. Makes a good dressing.
Yeah. So it's a lot of work, but I do think it's the holy grail. I mean that's where you have to make that work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Understand each other.
To add on that, I think it is also to change the leadership style. Not to be the traditional manager, but and to empower the teams and to enable the teams. It's a completely different leadership style than the traditional manager who asks for the KPIs and deadlines,
and reporting structures and hierarchy,
budgets, and of course important things, financial. But if you steer on speed and quality, and to demo every time in a fixed heartbeat, and to enable the teams, the costs are the results, and the value is the result. And I think. That different leadership style, it's a long journey I'm going
to move on to the last question then. Do you think the knowledge and ideas of tech talent which is being employed today is being used to its full potential within organisations? Or do you still think it's been shackled in some way in terms of, just build things? What do you think about that in terms of the tech talent in teams today, in companies today?
I have a different challenge.
Okay.
We have a different challenge. The challenge for us is to attract digital talent. There is a completely war on talent, and it's a very scarce capability.
It is.
So when we have digital, I think, of course, we can better use maybe those capabilities, but then we have. But it's the first step is to be attractive, to attract digital talent, and that's a very hard way nowadays.
The big change I see happening in our company is that nowadays I see people from business moving over to IT. But eight years ago they said IT, don't want to work in IT. Now IT is becoming sexy. It's becoming the place to be. And also the other way around, I see IT people moving into business.
So very important.
And those kind of movements are very important in terms of changing the culture in your organization. Because I got people from the business in my IT teams who know how it works, who speak their language.
Got different viewpoints.
And that helps.
And that's exactly what you need, right? Because basically your question is how to unlock any potential. Whether it's marketing, whether it's financial, whatsoever. But bringing them together and building cross-functional teams and just getting them together is really the first step, and then getting them a real challenge, and then you see people thrive. Well, I think we have seen examples where where we had success, and probably also examples where it failed. But I think in working in those cross-functional teams is really the answer to unlocking the potential we have. I think we all work in a tech or tech-savvy world. It's not really about business or IT. It's really a joint effort.
That's great. Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time, or have run out of time.
Okay.
So thank you very much for joining me today. Thank you very much for joining into that discussion.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, it was very, very valuable. So thanks for joining this session. We'll be gone for about 30 seconds, and next up I'll be speaking to Bart from PostNL about his digital acceleration. Hello, welcome back for our next interview session, where I'm joined by Bart de Mul, who is Chief Digital Officer at PostNL. And we'll be talking about digital acceleration at scale. Bart leads the Digital Acceleration Programme at PostNL. So really what we want to do is find out more about the areas of focus, what the challenges are, what he's found the opportunities to be, and how he can make sure, or how he makes sure that the organisation can adapt to this digital change at all levels. So thank you very much for joining me today. To start off with, can you just give our audience a brief introduction about who you are, what your role is, and a little bit about PostNL as well?
Thanks for having me here.
No
Bart
problem.
I'm the Chief Digital Officer from PostNL since last year.
Yeah.
A year now. I actually come myself out of tech space, always been in the tech space, and I made the move to logistics. PostNL, we are the leading e-commerce, logistics and postal platform player in the Benelux.
Yep.
We also have a large international business, so also in and out of the Benelux for our e-commerce and our mail.
Oh, brilliant.
My role is actually to accelerate the digital transformation of the digitization of PostNL.
Perfect. That leads me on to my first question then. Hopefully we're just about to say the same thing. So what I find interesting is a lot of the organisations that I speak to and DEPT speaks to talk about digital transformation, and that seems to be the subject of today, digital transformation. But from our conversations and how you've introduced yourself, you talk about digital acceleration rather than transformation. Can you tell us why you talk about acceleration rather than transformation? And is that specific to your organisation, where you are, or just a bit of background?
It's linked to who we are and the market we are actually. So, we are actually in the e-commerce logistics. So we're actually in the digital space in a way, but at the intersection of digital and physical. And it's important to understand that we started our digital transformation already in 2015. It's not always maybe that visible, but if you think about PostNL, we have modernized our IT stack and it's fully in the cloud. We have more than 110 APIs and plugins, on which are used for 7 billion data calls per year to actually be able to deliver the parcels. We have an app with 7 million users, which has a 4.5 rating on which everybody tracks and traces their parcels. So we are quite far. At the same time, we realized, end of 2019, beginning of 2020, that our market is also in enormous, transformation or speed or maturing with an influx of players, which you will have seen in the Dutch market. So, and we just need to still go faster from a competitive point of view, but also because the needs of our customers are just rising and rising. So we need to follow that, and that's only possible with technology.
And imagine those changes as well are on two different sides. There's the back-end more logistics function, but also the customer experience function.
Yeah, absolutely.
You treat them separately, differently? How do you kind of come at those problems?
Yeah, so I have a very almost dogmatic statement there that digital is nothing else, or digital transformation is nothing else than the new form of customer transformation.
Yep.
So for us, it all starts and ends with our customers, both kind of the senders and the receivers. We have the customers and the consumers. So it all starts from there. So as a result, it's also a very comprehensive and cross-functional. So we really address what we call our commercial engine and digitize the interactions and get to a better customer experience there, which are our channels, our journeys, and so forth. But we also work very hard kind of on our core, our logistics core, where we have hyper-automation. We have just launched or announced our small parcel sorting center, which is fully automated with robots and robo-arms and so forth. And we also work kind of on our digital business model, so that's also evolving. For example, I have myself a small data business. This one is just growing and we're building out. We also need to be more of a platform player.
Okay.
So it's very comprehensive.
Yeah, it touches every single part of the business.
But if you look at kind of just all the change that needs to happen in our company, 95% touches digital or does require IT. We have kind of an agile change organization. We are producing 350 features per quarter.
Wow.
That's 1,300 people, so we are actually a small software company.
More of a software company.
And that's including all our partners on top of the 1,300.
So PostNL is a very established old company with a very big workforce. I think you said around 40,000, over 40,000 people. Digital change, as we all know, impacts everyone within an organisation, especially when it's as encompassing as you've just explained about changing literally the whole business model. How do you get everyone involved in that or on board on that, from kind of your colleagues who are delivering the parcels and the mail all the way through up to the board? How do you get those people bought into this and bought into the change which is happening and needs to come?
Yeah, it's always been one of my statements. I've done quite some digitization also in other sectors, also with the more established players. And the point is actually that why you need to do it is just super obvious, right? If you don't know that, you should more or less go on pension these days.
Okay, yeah.
The what also, but it's actually a people transformation, and we are very aware of that. So we actually have something with, there's a component to our acceleration, which is building our digital DNA.
Yep.
Where we work on very many different things to bring the people along. We actually work kind of on the skill building. We have a big Digital Next program, academy, where we train like 1,000 people. So every quarter there are sessions. But we're also doing a lot of upskilling. So we have kind of Fit for IT, where we retrain people to IT, for example. We work a lot on engagement, communication. In such a big company, you need to repeat. Yeah. That's why we also did our Fast Forward, the theme of the year with DEPT. Thank you very much. But to actually give kind of the impulse. But then we also work on the way of working. So we actually have our Agile Next program to change the way of working, become really truly agile enterprise. And so we really address this very explicitly.
And that agile way of working, is it permeating throughout the entire company in terms of how you approach all sorts of projects, not just digital projects?
Yeah, so at the moment, we're actually expanding it, but let's say all change that we do, whether it's actually digital or not, goes through that actually. It's one integrated model across the company. And we're actually expanding that. So in my view, we should just do it for everywhere where there's more of a change or innovation component to the company. So innovation in actually the operations, you can also do agile.
Rather than not doing change for change's sake, wait for it needs to be changed and then.
Yeah. So and we make a bit of a distinction between our call it management. And then our front line. In the front line, of course not, because we are in operation and we just should do more lean, it's repetitive, but in all the rest, actually, we should be agile.
Okay. We spoke last week, and one of the phrases, because you have some really good phrases, which I was writing down throughout our chat. You said that speed of change, particularly speed of digital change, happens faster than you think. Can you tell me about your experience with that and what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's a bit after 22 years in the tech space, it's a bit of a feeling. So I started out in Nokia mobile phones, digital convergence unit in the end of the 90s.
Okay.
Yeah, and there we were actually, and also in venture unit, we were thinking, or I was the first manager service and applications, thinking out which services will we use on mobile and which applications do we need and which technology. And the reality is, if I look back, it's just much bigger and much faster came than I ever imagined. When we put cameras, I still remember when we first put cameras in the mobiles, we had done a research to figure out, are people going to use it? Yeah, we were overwhelmed how people figured it out, what to do with it. So at the same time, when I left Nokia, but around 6, 7, when Apple and Samsung opened the App Store and multi-sided business model came to the market, and Nokia had not seen it yet. It also took only 3-4 years for Nokia to go down the drain, and that's a key reason. So my observation is just always goes faster than we think, and especially in a digital world where you can get any insight, any data at your fingertips, this will just accelerate, I think. Especially for companies from our position. Right?
Yeah, who are an established.
Yeah, we still need to get out of the inertia. We need to mobilize. For us, it always goes faster than we think. So I just have this healthy paranoia.
Yeah, it's a good paranoia to have, I think. We were talking in the panel previously about. We were talking a lot of questions about the IT department, and the panel was saying, okay, let's not talk about the IT department, let's talk about digital. And your role is an interesting one. It's Chief Digital Officer, which is a relatively new role for organisations. And it doesn't fit, I imagine, into a traditional org chart where you have IT, marketing, different business functions. With that new role, how does that fit within the organisation, where you might not have direct responsibility for some things, but you have a lot of responsibility to make sure there is change and driving that digital agenda? So how does that work within your organisation?
We have a bit of a particular setup. It's really fit for purpose that we thought it out. So I do fit, right? Otherwise I wouldn't be there.
Exactly.
And I'm very blessed to have Marcel Krom as a CIO, right? With whom I can also work very well, who is also extremely foresightful and very business-minded. But the way we set it up actually is to say, look, I will fulfill 3 roles. I will have a kind of orchestration role on this acceleration, where I will work with the rest of the organization and mobilize them, so that we actually execute whatever we need to execute. I also have kind of an innovation role to actually really push the thinking and innovation small, but also on our new business models, like our open platform, and inject that. But I also have kind of an operational role. I also run kind of our digital front end towards the consumers and our consumer activities and our data business. So I can actually have a bit of more momentum. And within that, I actually function also as a bridge between the business and IT. So like in many companies that still didn't talk very well always, although better in our company, but I'm a bit of this translation layer on, because I understand both sides actually. I came from the business side, understand tech. So
we talk with a lot of clients about the importance of having people from the business embedded within product teams, sometimes in a product owner type of role, who can make who are empowered to make decisions on what works for the business, what works for the customers. Is that absolutely critical when building a product to have that insight in your technology teams?
Depends on which, we don't look at them actually, if we say the same as technology teams. We have all our agile teams, which are for us really truly agile. They're really cross-functional. We have different types on our core product or kind of our logistics, our channels. But for example, our journey teams, so we're a service company, so our journeys are important. There we have actually more business people than actually technical people, because I see them as business managers that actually manage that or lead that particular journey. And they have actually both the business side and IT and service design and so forth in the team, and data actually.
With these agile teams, how important is it for the teams to shift from a mindset of, I say a delivery mindset of, we have features and functions we need to get out and deliver for the business, opposed to a more performance-based mindset where it's actually, we're thinking about business performance and it's not particularly about projects anymore. It's like, how do we move the business from a performance perspective?
More an outcome-based.
An outcome-based, How important is that, and how difficult is it to shift that mindset?
Yeah, we work on both because I need to accelerate, so I need to also do more. So we work actually on the throughput. That's actually easier. But we also try to generate the shift in our company to actually more customer benefits. So improving the NPS of our customers and consumers, but also more business benefits. Yeah, both are quite challenging in general in our company. So for us, we are kind of a very operational company. So for us to do it from the benefit of the customer is a bigger shift, and we just hammer it. That's why we're also shifting from KPTV to NPS. We always ask the question, there needs to be a clear goal on it. And we also try to actually make the shift to actually financial benefits, end to end, from the case to the realization, which from my experience always the challenge with digital transformations. How do you really lock in the value also, because you first need to build and the benefits come actually way later. We have a lot of attention to that.
Okay. Apart from moving to a performance-based kind of mindset where you're thinking about the value that you're adding to the business, not just about features and functions, is a big, you mentioned it before, is building capability within the organisation. And it's very important, particularly, as you say, you may be seen now more as a software company as anything else. Well, maybe not, but there's a lot of software development involved.
We still have a lot of people.
But I think top of everyone's agenda at the moment is the war on talent, and how do you attract when your business your business model is so dependent on building software and software enabling your business. How does an organisation like PostNL think about attracting and keeping and retaining, particularly engineering talent, when you have what could be seen as sexier tech companies kind of going after people with the same skills? How do you think about that, and how do you approach that particular problem?
It's a very good and also very difficult question, because I actually got the call from one of the CMOs of a scale of a unicorn to ask, do you have the same problems as us losing people? The Dutch market is very competitive. I think we try to explain what the opportunity is to work on digital topics with us. We're still one of the leading logistics players. We are very advanced. We're the first one who could actually abolish our second delivery attempt because of the machine learning algorithms that we have. So there is a lot to learn. So that's one of the aspects of our value proposition to people. Secondly, we try to differentiate a bit. With us, you also have we have a role in society. And that's also very compelling to many people. We have a role to fulfill more on the mail side and e-commerce. We help build also, and we have always built the e-commerce market with our customers in the Netherlands. So you can also come and build something that contributes actually to society again in the Netherlands. So we try to emphasize that a little bit. We do have very heated debates internally on, do we value our engineers as much as the people who run a big operation and are actually steering or managing 3,000-4,000 people? And that's my battle to have with my colleagues, and that's also awareness and change we need to go through. Absolutely. And it's a challenge.
It is a challenge, and I think for a lot of engineers, the tooling, the technology they get to work with every day is very, very important to them. are you constantly updating and making sure that it is of the cutting edge and is that a very important thing culturally for your organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. That's also something that Marcel, our CIO, always has been driving and pushing. He's a very innovative person.
Yeah.
And we always have been on that path. I think the luck we have is that actually in the past years there's been a massive technology push in this digitization of PostNL, which actually gives a lot of interesting things to work with and very good tooling to work with.
Moving towards the last couple of questions. If the audience have any questions, then please feel free to put them in the chat, send them across, and I'll pose them to Bart as soon as we get through my questions. If I were a traditional organisation and I've only just got started on this, let's say COVID and the pandemic was the jolt that woke me up and said I need to start my transformation, not accelerate but actually get started. And I'm a very traditional business. And I need to take advantage of this new digital economy. What would you recommend as an experienced chief digital officer about where to start?
Maybe more as an experienced consultant here,
yeah.
applied on PostNL. I think the most important thing is actually alignment in the entire leadership of the company that this is necessary and to embark on it. Commitment that for 3 to 5 years, and that it's one of the top 3 things to do in the company because it touches almost everything. That's the first thing, the first condition. We also have actually done that effort or exercise to actually do this acceleration. The second one is kind of a real clear, doable plan. So a real plan from the future, what are we going to do and what are we not going to do? So it needs to be prioritized and doable. So that you can focus everybody on that and start on it. And then the third is, then really mobilizing quickly and taking a couple of bigger, very visible things to start on and create traction, because digital is also a lot about traction.
Yeah.
So we've done that around 4 big things. There's a lot of other things, but the 4 big things, we said, look, we need to simplify before we can digitize. So we'll do a simplification program in our mail business on the product side. We need to really work on the commercial side and the customer experience. So we'll start a journey factory to take our most important journeys and digitize them, simplify them. And we will actually start working on a digital supply chain initiative in the operations. And each of the ExCo members could lead one. Okay. And in addition, we start working on the Agile Next transformation.
Agile Next, yeah.
Because we already had for 4 or 5 years, bring it to the next level. So you can start creating traction visibly.
Great. I have one question here, just looking at my screen, is how have you dealt with the growth in the past year in terms of technology and bringing in the talent? So I think that's expanding a little bit on our previous question. But how have you dealt with the explosion of it in the past, especially for PostNL, which is about delivery, which I imagine the past 18 months have gone through the roof. How?
Well, we have very good partnerships actually. So we still do a lot with partners. So we have a very flexible layer. So we can scale up well in technology. Question is now, the more it becomes core, do you need to start doing yourself?
Yes.
But for example, if I think about our app, that's very few people actually within the company, but we actually have a partner with whom we work for years already, so we can move very fast. We have done very much in terms of recruiting in the market. So we have lots of programs to actually attract talent to PostNL. And we're even retraining people towards the more digital side or the IT side from our population very actively.
How do you find that? Because we see, certainly we've seen a lot of people switch career in the past 2 years. And how do you deal with that in terms of someone from a completely different job function? Say, I want to move into engineering, I want to move into technology, I want to be a developer. Is that something that you help enable? How does that work?
We do so. We try to facilitate that as much as possible. Of course, it's not possible for all roles. You will not become a data scientist even I will not become a data scientist. But for roles where it's possible, we try to do so. I actually have met people who used to be a mail lady, actually delivering mail, who actually went into the IT side.
Oh, wow.
So we also then try to retrain people in Scrum Master roles and so forth, the ones that are more accessible. Digital is much more than just IT.
Do you think that's very valuable because some of those people have been roles which are closer to the customer or the end customer, and having that knowledge of actually what works.
Absolutely. I also do think it's part of our, if you then call it transformation, we are a large employer.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why we do that is also to have a good home for people in the future with interesting jobs. So there will be a very big strategic shift in the resourcing. So we will need to retrain people. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Bart. We've got to the end of our chat. Found that incredibly interesting. So thank you very much for your time and answering the questions. So we've got a very short break now, and then I'll be handing back over to Lucas.
Yes, and that brings us to the end of Tech Day. Once again, we really would like to thank all of them who participated today: PostNL, Unive, DAS, KPN, and of course Spotify. And once again, for who missed the opening, Daniel Gabler from Picnic was unable to attend today. So we will make sure that we will interview him somewhere in the coming weeks and make sure that the interview will be in your email. Once again, thank you so much. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did and hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.